Hello, everyone, and welcome to Claris Community Live. I'm Rosemary TG, Community Manager at Claris, and your usual host. But today we're going to try something different, and Martha is going to host the conversation today. So we'll let her take it away.
Thanks, Rosemary. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Community Live. I'm excited to be here. I'm Martha Zink, like Rosemary said. I'm the manager for community and learning here at Claris. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're about to pull up a Slido, Rosemary, if it's not up yet. But we've got a Slido with a few questions. If you all can take a look at those and give us some answers, we'd appreciate it. Also, we'd love to hear your questions as we make it through the community live. So feel free to drop any questions or comments in the chat. Just make sure that it's being sent to everyone so we can see those things. All right, today I'm very excited to say that we are joined by Joris Aarts and Werner Marinus to share the story of DIGIPARK. You might have seen the story elsewhere, but here we're going to get a behind the scenes view of the work that's gone into that. It's a very modular integrated system that's built on the Claris platform. And it's a really good story of a citizen developer working with a Claris partner. So without making you wait any longer, I would love for them to introduce themselves. So Joris, do you want to start?
Yes, sure. Okay, I'm Joris Aarts, co-founder of ClickWorks. We started 20 years ago, and now we are a team of 14 developers, a long-time platinum partner, co-organizers of the European DevCon Engage You. And we are based in Antwerp, in Belgium, in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, very close to where the provincial parks are and where Werner is located.
My name is Werner Marinus, but you can say Werner. I am a civil servant. I work for the province of Antwerp. We are a regional government, and we have many departments and branches. And my branch is the Provincial Parks of the Antwerp region. We manage 3 parks where we do a lot of things. I'm not a professional designer or developer or whatever. I'm what you might call a citizen developer. Came across FileMaker a couple of years ago, looked into it, got into contact with Joris, who happens to be a neighbor of the park, and we started working together a couple of years ago, and gradually this turned into a good cooperation and into DIGIPARK. Well, we'll talk about it a little later now.
Awesome. Rosemary, do you want to, it sounds like we're getting some results from Slido. Do you mind telling us a little bit about what we're seeing on what kind of roles we have here or who's attending?
Yep. So for our roles, it's pretty evenly split between citizen and in-house developers, independent developers, that's a little bit lower, developers working for partners, and Claris partner leaders. So I'd say we're almost 25% of each of those at this point. And then for our second question of have you tried building with Claris Connect or Claris Studio? 60% have tried Connect, 40% have tried Studio, and about a third have not yet tried either one. So I'm hoping you will inspire them to at least check out Studio if they can.
Yeah, this is definitely a great story for Studio. All right, well, let's get started with if you want to tell us a little bit about DIGIPARK and just go through its history and maybe show us some screens. So Werner, do you want to start and share some information about it?
Yes. As I said, we are a park and we do a lot of things. We have educational activities. We have about 20,000 school kids that come over to the park for educational workshops. We have concession stands. We host events and we organize our own events. Of course, we maintain a park. We have flower collections. We have an arboretum. We do a lot of things. And that means we have a lot of processes going on and procedures. And one of the things that I encountered as head of administration, that we have a lot of information, but it is splattered all over the place. It's not located in one central area. We use all kind of tools to get things done. And the problem is that none of those tools, or not many of them, are interconnected or on the same platform. And that's how I discovered FileMaker, really by accident, really. When I bought some Apple machinery for myself, I was looking for applications to install, came across FileMaker, had a look into it, and I said, well, this is something we could use at work too. And then I started working with it, exploring it, and found that I finally had a tool to get things combined into one environment. And I started out with a little app that I ordered from Joris and his team to do the playground inspection. And while they were working on it, I went into deeper exploration of FileMaker and started making something on my own, and that evolved into the internal platform. And I saw within the Claris documentation the advice: give your platform its own name. And together with my director, we looked for a name, and we came up with the name DIGIPARK. I don't think that needs any further explanation. What was the origin of it? And we built a little platform of our own now, and it's growing into more complex things and a broader procedure, broader aspect of the inner workings of our branch.
So if I can jump in, we started building the first app on iPad for playground inspection. So checking on a weekly basis if nothing is wrong, if there's no glass fragments lingering around the playgrounds and so on. And Werner was very curious in the beginning and followed every step and was very cooperative. And then he went quiet for quite a long time. And then when he called me back the first time, he showed me what he has built. And if it's okay with it, I'm going to share that.
Yep.
So I'm going to share the screen. And so after almost 1 year, this is what he showed to me, and I was like blown away. So all these buttons are little apps, but I think you can explain it better, Werner.
Yeah, of course, everything is in Dutch. That's the language we have to use internally by law. So, but some words will sound familiar, like HRM and dashboards, facility, and that sounds familiar in English too. What this is, as Joris said, behind every button there is a module. I call it modules, that deals with one aspect of our inner workings. We'll be looking into the one on the top left corner, HRM. We are about 100 people strong. As you can see, personeelsless, it means staff. We are 100 people, and that used to be in a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet had about 15 worksheets. And on worksheet 1, I used to be a male, and on worksheet 6, I worked half-time, and on worksheet 11, I was born 10 years ago instead of 60 years ago. Just to say, the information was not always up to date. It was sometimes repeated. You could have the same sheet twice. And we started out with my team, and I said, I think this thing FileMaker, it can help us in a better way to get things organized and get them to managed. Started out with a starter solution from Claris, and copied some things and made a few layouts. You see a pop-up button now. From top to bottom, it says in Dutch, staff, volunteers, job students, interns, freelancers, and UCAS students. That's something special. I won't go into that. But the thing that is most elaborated now is the top one, personnel, meaning staff. If you click on it, you get a list of all our current personnel, and if you can you get a quick glance at who is in our on our staff members list, and if you click through on one of the play buttons, you go to the detail of one staff member. I've taken myself as an example, not because I'm such a pretty example, but I will be sharing some information, and all this information is live. It's not a demo or whatever. So you're seeing actual information, and for privacy reasons, we've picked my details. On the top of the layout, you can see the different tabs. This used to be all covered or all splattered over the 15 worksheets. We gathered all the information that belongs together in one place. It says information about work, private information, notes, ICE info in case of emergency, measurements for when we need special clothing for events, documents, important things to note, and verifications is to check whether we have done something or not. Joris can click on this is the private information. People can say, yes, I would like to share the information with your team. They can opt in or opt out. And the next one is, I think, notes. Yes, I have a team of 5 people, and when somebody new starts in the company, we make a new file for that new colleague. But it's not always me who does that. It can be somebody of the team, but nobody of the team knew of each other what was done and what was not done. So we developed this little notes application. Every time you do something on the file, you add a little information and it gets stored in the information portal. By the way, how do we make a note? That's with the button on the top. The second one from the left, Maak notitie. Maybe you can swirl over it. Great thing, it works perfectly, and I learned that from Martha how to construct that from the internet. So thanks again, Martha, for the great tutorial on that. But now we have a history of things that were changed in the personnel file. All the documents, we are a governmental administration. That means we we love paperwork, but we are turning it all into digital format, and we can centralize them here in another portal.
There's an integration with SharePoint going
Yeah.
on. That's usually where we, as a partner,
Yeah.
come in for that kind of like, in this case, the MS Graph API calls to Microsoft SharePoint. So Werner has these IDs and usually builds up the screens, and then for specific tasks, we jump in and we make it happen.
Yeah. I don't know if you have also screenshots of the other tabs. Yeah, no, that we'll jump to a second module. It's the one in the middle on the top. It says budget management in Dutch. We have about 40 to 45 people who buy things for the park. We have an internal procedure to put in a purchase order, and it used to be done with spreadsheets. We had about between 1,200 and 1,300 spreadsheets a year. They were not connected. They were sometimes had errors in them. And we started out the year with a lot of money. And at the end of the year, we hoped to spend all of our money. But to be really honest, we didn't know what we were spending it on. 40 people that put in purchase orders without any overview is not what was perfect. And then we came up with a solution in DIGIPARK. Around November, people put in a request for a project they would like to do in the next year, and they say, I would like to have that amount of money. It goes into a list. The list goes to our director. He gives the thumbs up or a thumbs down sometimes, and then the people get warned about you can do that project next year. This is the list of all those projects. It says all 2026 requests, the number between brackets 275. People can add a little information. The one on the top that is opening now is one that I've managed. It's our licenses for software and hosting. At the end of the line, you can see status okay. So that's good news for me. I can buy my licenses for ClickWorks from ClickWorks for the FileMaker application, and we make the purchase order internally in FileMaker. it goes from the people who buy the stuff to my team. They have to put in the purchase order in another system that unfortunately has not been integrated into DIGIPARK yet. Not because we don't want it, but accounting department is a bit reluctant. And then people get their purchase orders. They can send it to the supplier. We put the purchase orders here in the project, and we can manage the project here. You can see it's a project that is about 35,000 euros has that budget allocated, and so far at this moment in time we have about 4.5% spent of this project. At least we know now how much money do we need for a certain project, how much is spent, and somebody of my team is doing the follow-up to manage these budgets. To give you an idea, it used to be done in spreadsheets and mails and all sort of things. We went from 1,200 spreadsheets to 0 because it's all in DIGIPARK now, and we've cut back the amount of emails that had to be exchanged with 50%. So that's a nice return on investment. As a governmental organization, we think differently about returns of investments, but this is for us an important improvement. There are links to the purchase orders. There are links to the file where they can the dossier where they can store all the information, like quotes from the suppliers and technical details. A little new thing you can see at the right-hand corner, the red button. It says in Dutch, close this project. That's something new. We didn't have that before, and one of my team says, yeah, but what if there will be no more purchase orders on this project? They won't be needing the remainder of the allocated money, but we don't know that. So we came up with an idea. You can close this project. You push the button, the project is closed. There comes a little padlock on it. You can no longer place any purchase orders on it, and we know how much money that was allocated but not spent we can recoup for other projects. We didn't have to wait to implement this new feature. We thought of it. We figured out how we wanted to do it. What kind of information do we need? What kind of communication has to be sent out? And we just build it in a couple of hours, basically.
One thing to mention, Werner, because you said like we're saving 1,200 emails a year, but there's also the time spent previously on budget consolidating. So if
Oh
you
yes,
want,
yeah.
a consolidated budget report, someone had to spend hours and hours
To gather information from 40 colleagues.
Report several times a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. This brings us to the next chapter.
Yeah.
Maybe gonna stop sharing for a while. So we are ready to talk a little bit more about Claris Studio integration.
Yeah. We have a petting farm, and one of the ideas was how about finding people that want to adopt the animals financially. Let's be clear about one thing: you adopted an animal, but you don't get it to take it home. It stays here on the petting farm. And that was an idea. It was the first time we would do something like that. And well, how are we going to organize that? And I said, yeah, well, we can make a list and we can put the list out for the audience to pick an animal. But I immediately saw one big problem for the colleague who had to manage this project. I said, you'll have to spend 24/7 next to your computer, because we know from another experience that people will be putting in requests for the adaptation of the animal day and night. And once an animal is picked by someone, you should take it out of the list, because the second one, the third person, the fourth person, and so forth, they will not know that the animal has been already been adopted. And how are you going to manage that? And I said, well, the idea is that you will be spending 24/7 next to your computer, but that doesn't seem like a very attractive idea. And she agreed with me, and I said, but let me give a call to Joris, because I think we can figure that out with FileMaker, Studio, and Connect. And so I called Joris.
Yeah, so I got a call from Werner, all nice and well. But basically another team already made attempts with Microsoft Forms and they messed up. They discovered, yes, the end result is a spreadsheet and it's static, and indeed the status of the animals cannot be updated dynamically, or they didn't know how, and so on. And by the way, the deadline is next week. And so I realized that with Claris Studio, we could first of all quickly assemble a form. It's quite a complicated form. I will show you in a minute. And second, we could hook it up to FileMaker and then run scripts in FileMaker to do that status check. So that's that monitoring and so change the status to unavailable when an animal was adopted. So let me share my screen again and let us jump again. So this is still DIGIPARK, and this is the module in FileMaker, the backend, so to say, but we built like a Claris Studio frontend. So these are the animals from the petting farm. So we have all kinds of animals, donkeys, ponies, cows, goats, and so on. And so this is what we built in a very short time span. It's quite a long form. So it's a lot of pages in Claris Studio, but Claris Studio handled it very well. Nothing too spectacular going on. We have basically one page per type of animal, and then some kind of clever routing between the pages, because depending on the choices you make, you need to fill in extra pages or not. So just to show you this, these are like kind of conditions going on to jump to a certain page based on a certain choice. So to show you that in action, let me quickly jump to what it looks like for someone that wants to adopt a pet. So jumps on the form and first gets to choose like the type of animal. Do I want like a rabbit or a donkey or a chicken and so on? So imagine I want to adopt a donkey. In Dutch, it's ezel. I'm jumping to the donkeys page. So there are 3 donkeys, but this is static, but below this is dynamic. So there's only one donkey still available, beautiful Roxanne.
And it says so.
If I select her,
It says so in Dutch, huh?
Yeah.
The little sentence there. Yeah.
And then moving on, I can leave my name and details and so on. So that's basically it. What's going on behind the scenes is, so this is the registration form, but it's driven by a table with available animals. And as you can see, Roxanne is the only donkey still available. So there's a status field. And this status is set by a FileMaker script. After an incoming registration, we immediately set the status to unavailable to avoid other people registering for the same animal. So that was one of the main advantages for Werner. The first one was this. And the second was the fact that this data is automatically also pushed to FileMaker. At that time, almost 1 year ago or 1.5 years ago, we used the so-called ESS Plus, so native studio tables in FileMaker, and so loading it directly in FileMaker. Today you can do that with Claris Connect and Studio Connector, and there are more possibilities now. So this is the status field. What else to show? Yeah, I showed you the gallery. The registrations themselves. So this is the table with all incoming registrations, and they're copied over to the DIGIPARK solution. So in DIGIPARK, they become available as regular FileMaker records, and in FileMaker there's much more going on than in Studio. Studio is just the front end for data intake, and then in FileMaker, Werner and his team have a lot more follow-up fields for billing, for planning, sending.
You get a certificate. Somebody has to take care of sending the certificate. We have a little message board with the people who adopted the animals, and they get their name mentioned on the board. Somebody had to make the little signature signs. So it was a lot of people involved in with this project, and they all had to go to one location, to find what they needed, and it was all in DigiPark.
Yeah, and so we finished this form like 1 hour before the press release,
Even
because
less,
it
half
was
an
an
hour.
official press release with like an actor or something like opening the registration, and then it ran on local television 24/7. So within 24 hours, all those animals were adopted. There were even
Yep.
animals adopted in the middle of the night. So it was a bit crazy, but it worked. It worked very well.
Yep.
But we learned a couple of lessons from it, and so maybe this is an occasion to jump to the next project we are planning with Claris Studio, because now the park wants to allow adoption of so-called memorial benches. So in certain areas or certain gardens of the park, like the Rose Garden, they have certain benches, and people are able to adopt a bench and have, like, I don't know, like a little
Yep.
card on it with
There
their
will be,
names or with the
the
text
names
on
will
it.
be on the benches. Yes.
Yeah. And so we believe it will be quite popular. It will also be released in the press. And so we also believe that there will be a lot of interest, much more than maybe for the animals, because there are more benches as well. And what we learned from our studio example, that we had to assemble very quickly, of course, is this. So going back to studio here, this is my hub. So this is the form. As you can see, it takes a while to fill in this form. People easily spend 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes providing all the details, financial details, leaving their address and so on. And while they are filling in the form, there's always a chance that someone else is taking or trying to adopt the same animal. And this happened, unfortunately, a couple of times. So we learned our lesson, and in the future, we will build a bit more advanced system, also with Studio, this time Studio and Claris Connect together. So in Studio, we will now have two forms. A very short form on purpose. It's very short. You just leave your name and email address, and you make a reservation for a certain zone or garden. I'm trying to open this here. So these are the 3 gardens that are actually already created in the system. So you basically specify, I want a memorial bench in the Rose Garden. You leave your name and email, and then that bench, or one bench in that zone, is reserved for you for 60 minutes. So you have 60 minutes time to continue with the second form, and a link to that second form is emailed to you. So that's also an extra layer of security. So you get an email with a link. That's all handled by Claris Connect, and then that email link leads to the more elaborate form, and then you have 60 minutes time to leave all those details. If you fail to do that, the bench becomes available again, and that's all driven by Claris Connect flows and Studio triggers. So Claris Connect detects when a new reservation comes in and acts upon it. So I'm going to switch to Claris Connect. And so these are the memorial benches for the park. There are 2 main workflows here. I will zoom in a little bit. So you have the reservation, that's the shorter form, and then the registration coming in. So the reservation only blocks a specific bench for 60 minutes, and the registration flow handles the final registration, all the details, follow-up, and the record creation in FileMaker. So without going to too much details, but it's quite a long flow. There are a couple of checks. There are a couple of sorry emails if you happen to click simultaneously with someone else and the last bench is taken. So there are a couple of safety nets built in. It's quite advanced, but it works well. As we are still in the testing phase, but it has already proven its worth. So this is a reservation blocking a certain bench for a certain period. This is handling the registration and pushing the record to FileMaker. I believe we are not there yet to push the record, but we are already handling the exceptions, sorry, expired, or confirming. And then the third flow is the flow that cleans up any benches that were reserved but never registered. So every 15 minutes, there's like a cleanup routine that sets the status back to available if a bench hasn't been registered within 60 minutes. So this is a 2-step or a 2-tier process, so to say, and it's driven by 2 forms in Claris Studio. the reservations registrations form, and there are also the reservations and registrations table. And this table, final registrations, this will be pushed to FileMaker and DIGIPARK to Werner's solution again. And further on, we have, of course, the zones, as you saw them, so the different gardens with the number of benches available, number taken, and so on. So as soon as number available reaches 0, the state is set to unavailable, and so that zone also disappears from the form. That's why it wasn't visible earlier on in the example I've shown you. So that's what we are planning for the coming months.
That's really awesome. I one of the things that is so exciting to hear and see is the way that you can ship and iterate. You created a thing with maybe 30 minutes time left before it had to be out there. You were able to try it out and then get some feedback, right? Oh, we double booked things, right? There were some issues that you ran into later you couldn't predict. It happens. And you're already working on that next version. So my question is, who comes up with the next version ideas? How are you thinking, you know, with you two clearly have a great partnership on the work that you're doing, but where do the ideas come from?
Every month I send 10 euros to a guy somewhere in Sweden for ideas, and he sends me an envelope with 3 ideas. And
Beautiful. We'll need his number.
The ideas come from basically from everywhere, from everybody who's working in DIGIPARK. For instance, sometimes when we buy something, it has to be taken up in the inventory. Like a new machine, it has to go into the inventory. I think that's a standard procedure in a lot of companies. But the colleague who buys the machine, how does he notify the colleague who has to take care of the inventory? So my team member who takes care of the inventory said, well, I have to go through all of the purchase orders just to see if there's something that needs to be on the inventory. So how isn't there a better way to fix this? So we came up with this idea. We added a little checkbox in the purchase order layouts. Does this purchase order contain item lines or line items that have to be taken up in the inventory? If yes, check this box. If no, just say leave it open or just check no. And then they put in the purchase order and it goes through the process. And my team member has now a layout. She opens it and she gets a list of all the purchase orders that contains something that has to go into the inventory. So the problem was signaled by somebody from the team. We had some ideas, some discussions about it. How can we solve this? And it got resolved in DIGIPARK. So that was something from within the team, but it can be anyone from the colleagues with an idea. Oh, this might be a better way to do things. Sometimes I see something from another application. I think, well, that could be a nice thing to have, like making a note of somebody in the personnel file, for instance.
Yeah, and sometimes we come up with ideas. So one example is
Yes.
literally I pitched OData and Power BI to Werner because he's sitting on a gold mine of data, and in FileMaker it's not always easy to visualize that data. If you have tools like Excel and pivot tables, pivot charts, you are used to that flexibility. And with OData, it's relatively easy. You just need to know how to set it up, and that's where we come in. And I showed him last week. I think we did a 2-hour session together, Werner.
Yeah.
I set it up together with you in the Office 365 environment, which is the default environment at the province of Antwerp. And so for me, it's important that FileMaker is also a good citizen in that environment, and it's not regarded as something on the side or something strange or something locked. No, au contraire, we try to open it up. And so OData and Power BI was one of the examples. And so within 2 hours, we managed to load a couple of tables in Power BI and start visualizing it. So yeah, that's one example. And another example that that we are now slowly trying to pitch to Werner is refactoring and organization of code. Because after a couple of years, and that's a typical phenomenon with a single developer or yeah, without being negative, but if you are on your own, you're building and thinking about the possibilities. Sometimes you need to step back and look at the technical depth you are creating. And like if you need a table for every year, 2025, 2026, that's not a good way of handling data if you need a new table every year. And this is our expertise, and there we can really help Werner to show him on how to create a system that persists and that does not need those ad hoc movements, so to say.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I have lived that world before, where you have something that works and it's doing its job perfectly fine. But as you think of its longevity and it's an investment, right? You've invested in this platform, you want to keep using it, and there are improvements and changes that have to happen over time because of that. So I think having a partner that can help you see those things and can help implement those things is awesome. I don't know how many citizen developers have a relationship with a partner like this, but I think this is a highlight of it, which is that my sense is that these teams get to work together, right? You're not butting heads against each other. In fact, you're doing the opposite. You're collaborating and getting to expose some of these technical issues that you want to work through, but also the ideas keep coming because you have different perspectives on what you're seeing.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I think we have a lot of citizen developers watching this. Werner, do you have any advice for them or things as someone who's been doing this now and so involved in the development and the weekly work? Anything you would say to people who are trying to build things in FileMaker or the Claris platform?
yes. It's like with the athletics company that we all know, and their slogan is "Just do it." I would advise the same thing. Try something, build something. We started out with one thing, the turn the Excel sheet into something useful in DIGIPARK or in FileMaker. There, the big aha moment there was I had set it up. I had put the file on a server. I went to my colleague and I said, "Look, go to the." I had some cartoon figures in the list. I say, "Change Mickey Mouse into Minnie Mouse," and I'll watch on my side in my office. And I said, "Go ahead." And she said, "I've changed it." And I saw, and I said, "This is it." Stupid story, but that's how we got started with some ideas. How do we get information in one place, how we look at that information, or what kind of things we can extract from the information, that can depend on different kind of people and or positions or whatever, or needs or whatever. But at least we now have one area where all the information is stored, and that was really the big idea, and that got my team convinced to say, well, this is better than the spreadsheets we are using. Spreadsheets plural we are using. So just do it. Start with something, with one thing, and learn from it, and adapt and build upon it.
Those aha moments are huge, especially early on, right? And just like, we talked about just being able to ship and iterate. When you get to do something and it just works, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be everything, but you get to potentially deliver something that could add a little bit of value, even if it's just changing the names from Mickey to Minnie, right? It still has value. You can see it. Yeah. I've heard a lot of stories of being able to pitch using FileMaker by showing that, right? By creating something light and easy, giving good guardrails around what you're trying to show, and then advertising it. And I think that's key for citizen developers, because you're trying to get buy-in for this investment into this platform and really doing good work in it. I love it. That's awesome. I love "just do it" as a phrase. We'll see if they will decide to sponsor us. I don't know how that works, but we can hope. We'll keep you posted. So you can keep paying your ideas guy over there. Joris, what about you? You have this opportunity to partner with someone who's in-house, which again, maybe not every partner does it that way. I'm not sure, but what's your take? How does it? What advice do you have?
Yeah, we have actually several clients, customers that have either in-house developers or business owners, and love the idea of having control and literally shaping their business with their own hands. And because FileMaker is much more than just a software tool, it allows you to, it forces you to think logically about processes. So building something in FileMaker is also in a way transforming your organization. I think Werner can witness that as well. You need to think about process streamlining. You cannot have scattered information anymore, so you need to create some kind of priority: who first, who after, and so on and so on. And it's lovely to work with customers eager like Werner, because they also get it. They get FileMaker. They get the limitations, because there are certain limitations in FileMaker, but they also see the possibilities. And so there's a lot of things you don't need to explain anymore. A lot of expectation management and so on. And as Werner mentioned, just do it. FileMaker is very forgiving. That's also the reason that I started with FileMaker in the very first place. You start building the learning curve with Studio as well, by the way. The learning curve starts very slow, but it goes actually very far and very deep. And I still often hear that story from newcomers to FileMaker, like, oh gosh, you can go one step further and even one step further. So last week when I showed Power BI to Werner, it was like, oh my God, yes, my FileMaker allows me to do this because my data is now structured and I can now tap into this. So you get eye opener after eye opener with FileMaker.
I'd like to add something about the transformation. We've tried other software. We actually bought some software, and we always had to adapt to the software. We had to change things to be able to use the software. And with the FileMaker, it's the other way around. We have our procedures, and we manage to tailor the software to our procedures, because sometimes we don't own the procedure. It is because of company regulations or whatever, and platform allows us to keep our procedures and get better performance out of the procedures. So we didn't have to adapt to the software. That was also a very important aspect.
That's a huge one for sure. I think from what you've shown and just the things you were just saying, the other thing that I love is how this is such a great example of FileMaker, Connect, and Studio as just tools in your tool set. And you've mentioned Power BI, and you talked about integrations with other things. I saw that you were sending emails through Microsoft. So how do you make those decisions? Like when you come to the table with a problem to solve, is that how you think of it? Do you just kind of lay out all your tools and say what's out there?
Yeah, because one of the remarks I had received from a colleague when we had the other platform, I said, well, we have to this and after, and she said, well, I have to register it there, and I have to register the information in that platform, and I have to register. And that made me realize, well, we need to look for something that can combine all of those things within one environment, and that's one of the reasons why people are willing to adopt it. They only have to go to the starting page of DIGIPARK, and they can fill in. Sometimes they buy something with their own money, and they can ask for a refund from the organization. That used to be a paper process. Now it's into DIGIPARK. It's GDPR safe. It works smoothly. It works fast, and they don't have to go to yet another platform to register or put in the form or whatever. It's centralized in one area, and that makes it nice for the people to work with.
That's awesome. This is I love seeing stories like these where it just feels so you cover so much, right? You get to use the different tools in different ways. You get to partner through it. I get a sense that you love doing it and that you like solving these problems and getting to kind of figure out what's the best way to accomplish things, and then to get to think through those ideas and how to make it better. I know I tend to get a high from that, so it's great to see it from the outside too.
Yeah, I think there's a good question that goes to what you've all been discussing. And it's from Bob, who said, I'm coming from a government that minds its finances very carefully. So he's curious how you've thought about and communicate with others, with the leadership and others you work with, your division of labor between what Werner does and what ClickWorks does, and also the value that you get from the partnership.
What is and what would Bob like to know exactly? The coming from my curious how you've thought about and communicated around the division. Well, the communication with the others was a bit of a one-way communication. We said we're going to do it with. We started out with forms, and then we had all of the information in an Excel sheet. That took us a lot of time to process, and I said we're going to have to do this in a better way. I came up with the idea as I pitched it to my boss, and I just said it's going to take us much less time to get it all fixed. And he said, go for it, because he's a very busy man. He has a lot of responsibilities, and if he can shorten things or make things faster, that's always a big win for him. And all of the other colleagues, they saw the advantage too, because previously we had to mail them tailor-made messages, and now we have it integrated into DIGIPARK. Once they get, once the director makes a decision, you get the budget or you don't get the budget. He just pushes a couple of buttons. He says, "This is the final. This is the sign-off." We go to another layout. One of my team members goes to another layout. They get a button. They push the button, and the message sent to the colleague is accordingly to the decision that was made. They get their feedback. They know why they don't get to do the project, or sometimes there is a very good reason. Because, for instance, another project has to be completed first before your project can proceed, and we need licenses to build something or whatever. So that's a big improvement, the internal communication, and the workload, the separation of the work, or the allocation of the workload. Well, we don't have strict rules on that, but every time we came up with something, it was an improvement. We haven't done anything yet just for fun. It was always out of a business need that or a business problem that needed to be solved.
If I can add something to that, because that's a question we often see with citizen developers, in-house developers. It's sometimes hard to defend new development and to sell it to your boss. And Werner is actually indeed very clever about it. You have your marketing in order. Werner, first of all, the name DIGIPARK, it's now, nobody's talking about the FileMaker solution, or FileMaker, or FileMaker is down. Everybody talks about DIGIPARK, and even the IT department, they see it as a standard. Oh yes, DIGIPARK. So you're in a whole different ballpark. It's much easier to have conversations like that. And then second, indeed, convincing your boss, not with technical arguments, but with the benefits, with how many hours do you gain, or how much faster will it be? And that's usually key to get approval. And I must say, Werner is very clever about that. That's true.
I have no remarks on that last thing that Joris said.
I love it. I think that's awesome. Yeah, I think having to defend why this work matters, and really the thing that you said that really struck me is that you're solving business needs. So talking to the right people, prioritizing those needs in a way that you can show the value quickly, and then being able to defend that working with someone who can move you a little faster at certain times is really great. And I'm guessing that even just having someone to bounce ideas off of is super helpful. Here's the problem we're running into. What do you think? Right? I think having whether it's people in your company or reaching out to someone like Joris is super helpful, because you get to say, what can we do here? So I think that partnership can definitely save. I think that pays for itself and is part of the investment too.
We started very small. We started with a couple of hours, maybe occasionally. But Werner is a very busy man, and so I think a lot of the development also took place in the evening hours or in the weekends or something. But now we are working on a structural basis, I believe, since 6 months now. That like half a day every week, someone from ClickWorks is at the office and helps Werner. And so now we are at a steady pace. And it's really amazing what you can do if you establish a routine like that. Then things become predictable. Werner can plan for things, can queue up things. We can add our ideas. And if I see where we are now with DigiPark and the integrations we've built together, it's really incredible.
That's great. So maybe if we combine all of the thoughts, it's just do it, and then it's start small, and then it's make a routine, right? Maybe that's the path
Something like
to,
that. Yep.
to doing more and more. I love it. That's perfect. All right, Rosemary, any other questions or anything else we should cover here?
There's one question that came in early, and that would be, it'd be interesting to see the calendar and booking system. But since, again, as you said, you can't show live data, and you don't have anything with demo data, could you at least talk a little bit about what you're doing there?
Which module? The
Calendar and booking system.
well, that's as Joris said, I'm a busy man. That's because unfortunately I have other duties to attend to besides building DigiPark, and we now have to focus on a couple of modules. Basically, most importantly, the budget management, the bookings. I found a tutorial on internet from a Belgian guy, Guy Stevens. Um, uh, he has a tutorial on how to make bookings like meeting rooms or cars or beamers if you need them, and he showed how you can book it and how you avoid overlaps, or how you can have times between returning and new reservations. So I had looked into it, and now I must confess, unfortunately, we still work with a book where you write down that you want to make a reservation for the car, the shared car that we use. That's on the list of things to do, and
I've built resource planning systems, Werner, so I can share.
I'll give you a call, Joris. I'll give you a call. But the idea is it's a bit crazy that sometimes I get a phone call from a colleague. He says, "Can you have a look at the reservation agenda and see if the car is available tomorrow in the afternoon from 1 to 5?" So I have to get up and go to the adjacent office to see if it's available. That's not the way things should be working in 2026 or even 2020 or 2000 maybe. So we need to get those things done. But unfortunately, as Yuri said, I'm the citizen developer. I'm the lone wolf. We are now looking to share what I've done, share my knowledge, so to speak, with other team members who are saying, well, this could be useful to have a team working on this, and we are gradually elaborating the people that work at the back end of the application. So maybe we have lots and lots of ideas. That's one of the problems. We have lots of ideas and not enough time. But if we have like 2 or 3 people that are coming into the platform and develop stuff within DigiPark, we can probably tackle all of the other ideas or problems that we are now encountering.
Yeah, and just as we close, someone sent me a private message with another great story I wanted to share briefly. And he said they built a booking application for visitors of a concentration camp in Germany, or a memorial site in Germany last year. It was so successful, they were picked by the Department for Memorial Sites for the state of Bavaria to roll this system out to other sites and to other departments. So that rollout project is in process right now. So I just
Okay.
congratulations.
Yeah,
If
congratulations.
the license fee is very moderate, they can give me a call.
Yeah, and the last thing I just wanted to share that from our survey, we did ask if you could adopt one of the petting farm animals, which one would you choose? Goats and rabbits were most popular.
Yeah.
I heard the
That's no
rabbits are pretty
surprise.
popular, right? Yeah.
They were the first ones to be to go. They were the first ones. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing your story. I hope that you will come back and show us the future version of DigiPark, because I know it will continue to grow and you'll continue to do great work on it. But it's great to see what you've done so far. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your time. And we hope those are inspired to try to just do it out there, who are ready to do new things. So thank you all. We appreciate it.
Yes, and just in
Thanks for
closing,
having me.
Right.
yeah, thank you, Werner and Joris. And in closing, Martha and I are both going to be on spring break in 2 weeks, so we will not have a community live on March 12th. Our next one will be 4 weeks from today on March 26th, and we're still firming up the agenda for that, so please keep an eye on Claris Community and in your email for the announcement and registration for that session. And so with that, any last thoughts, last questions from the audience? Well, thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.